All right, here we go. We have it. Thus,
Hey, what's going on, guys? Jay here from Faith Evolved, where I talk about all things spiritual, metaphysical, philosophical, and mental health. If it's your first time here, I want to say thank you very much for joining me today or tonight, wherever you are in this world. And, you might be justified in saying to yourself, man, what's up with this title here? It's a little clickbaity. Well, I can see how it could be, but, algorithms, what do you want from me? But actually, ironically enough, this is not a clickbait based episode. This is going to be the real deal. This is going to be as probably as confident that I've probably ever been about anything in my life, and it's going to sound almost like I'm one of those, oh my God, Jesus told me that he's coming back on April 15, 2026. Of course, it happens to be today's date, but that's not that kind of prediction. It's not that kind of prophecy, if you will. It's more of just based off of seeing how things go and kind of like extrapolating from there, like seeing how things have gone and throughout all of human history. And I'm not a expert when it comes to history, but I am what I would consider an expert at noticing patterns. It's one of my strengths, I believe. And I don't go around claiming that I'm like brilliant or a genius when it comes to these type of things, but I do know that it's served me quite well and helped me with my job and helped me with, even trying to, come to an understanding of just my existence and just understanding, you know, the world around me. It's helped me consolidate my worldview. It's helped me understand, just my kind of place in the world or place in the universe, and that we need to take a long distance view of things. You can't, judge, you know, the world based off of one generation, or even, where the world is going based off of just one generation, or where evolution is going based off one one generation. You need a lot of data. You need to look back and see the trends and the patterns, and then come to as educated of a guess as you can. I mean, of course, I'm going to be upfront and say that, of course, I could be wrong. I just don't think that I am wrong. I think I have enough evidence and enough information to make this determination. And what I'm going to lead off with is this is nothing new. They say there's nothing new under the sun. Basically, like a lot of things that we see and we have today have repeated itself throughout history. Nations rising and falling, you got wars, and even things like as simple as like music. Like you hear like certain trends coming back, things that were popular for a while, they kind of go out of vogue and then they come back. And nations that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. You know, so there's all that kind of stuff going on, right? And then just common sense. And what I want to talk about today is what I call the Midway creature prophecy. And what is what are midwayers? Well, if you've been following me for any length of time, you know all about the Urantia book, or at least you've heard of it, because you're not going to go more than a few episodes without seeing some reference to the Urantia book. And I've been a Urantia book reader since August 18 or 19 of 2018, so it's coming up on 8 years since that book changed my life. And I think the besides the fact that it just had truth bomb after truth bomb after truth bomb, it did two things that I think helped me really just believe that it was a revelation to mankind. Out of the fact that there's thousands and thousands, probably tens of thousands or more of these supposed channeled works and supposed spiritual texts, all the way from the Bible all the way up to different channeled books that come out in the 20th and 21st century, and probably stuff from even beyond before the Bible's time. But we have so many different the Torah, we have the Quran. I'm blanking on some of the other spiritual texts out there. The Law of One. I mean, there's so many of them out there. Even like A Course in Miracles, which I also subscribe to personally, or ascribe to. Is that the word? Um, but there's all these different spiritual texts out there, and the only one that I think actually had credence to get through my super INFJ brain. I'm a very critical. I don't take. I don't. I'm not easily like tricked into falling for different dogmas and theologies and just spiritual teachers and stuff. Like I haven't had that many what I would call, if any, really, maybe a couple that I can think of off the top of my head, supernatural experiences where like I prayed, God answered it. It couldn't have been, there's no other explanation besides it was God or maybe an angel or some spiritual force of nature or something that had some kind of intervention that caused said thing to come to pass. I consider myself kind of a nerdy person. I can, have a pretty high BS meter. So it took a lot to get through to me that I would be willing to say that I could, basically deconstruct from Christianity and believe in this revelation, this was it fifth epical revelation of mankind, the Urantia book. These 192 papers, 196, I think, papers that supposedly materialized out of nowhere, and the forum, the folks that were working, on getting the papers ready, and then eventually the Urantia Foundation released it in 1955. Like it's already surrounded with mystery and surrounded by things that would make you go, that's suspicious. Or as the kids say, that's sus. There was so much that could have made me, and thank God I didn't even know about half of these things till after I was halfway through the book, because it was at that point, I was like, something is different about this book. Something is way different. Something is it did two things that I think helped me fall into line with accepting this as a revelation is the fact that it kind of passed that BS meter. The things that it said, although I couldn't prove it, I'm not a scientist. I've known enough about science to say, okay, that makes sense. Or enough about religion, and enough about human culture and society, and even things like marriage. Just the different things that I understood about men and women and the differences thereof, and just the truth bomb after truth bomb, just everything just checked. How they say in when you go to church, test the spirit, make sure that it passes the sniff test, that it kind of it resonates, as what some spiritual people would call it. Yeah, I mean, of course, you can't prove that it's true necessarily, but it makes sense. And another part would be the fact that I would say it was something that I always kind of wondered about or always suspected, and then the Reggie book proved it. So those two things I would say were the biggest things that kind of kept me going, kept me reading or really listening, because I was listening to the audiobook. And and just I think what sealed the deal for me was the writings and teachings of Jesus. Like that's the Jesus that I kind of always felt he really was. The character, how he showed the love of the Father and just lived with the love of the Father, how he treated people, how much he just genuinely just lived the human life and still was able to transcend it. And the hope that he gave people, that the many times I've had tears in my eyes just hearing the way, it just felt right. It felt the way, Jesus, if there was someone as named Jesus that really walked the earth, that's how you would expect it. Deep down inside, that's how you would expect Jesus to be. That's the kind of, I can't, there's only maybe a couple of times that I was like, would I have done that if I was Jesus? Or, would I have thought that Jesus would have done something like that? But then after thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, I would have. Not if I understand the culture, the time period he was in, the things that he knew. There was not a single thing he did out of selfishness. Everything was out of love. And as much as the Bible, does show that he has that kind of loving character, to the point where Christians will say, "Oh, why does Jesus of the New Testament seem so different than the God of the Old Testament? So much more merciful and loving and kind and patient, where the God of the Old Testament was willing to wipe out entire nations of men, women, and children, at a whim, or send a flood, and save only a few people like Noah and his family." It's like, that doesn't sound like, if Jesus is God, that doesn't sound like God at all. So again, pass the sniff test. So that all being said, just kind of laying the foundation for why I'm so sure about this. That's part one. Part two is, again, the patterns, history, the way revelation has come to man in such a slowly released, iterated way, not just dropped. Because when that happened, it caused pandemonium, it caused chaos. That's what was Caligastia's sin, was trying to uh, do revolution, instead of working with evolution. And some of the examples I'll give is the fact that, you know, Adam and Eve, for example, and even Caligastia, like both of them tried to bypass the divine plan. They tried to, well, let's say, for example, Adam and Eve, how they portrayed in the Adventure book was that they're supposed to, mate and then have their children, and then the children have children, and they amass like thousands of Adamites, if you will. The violet race is what the Adventure book calls them, and then they send out ambassadors to different parts of the world, and bring people back to Eden and train them there. All right, and then they take those ambassadors and send them back out, to other nations, other tribes, whatever the case may be, and then those uplifted people that were trained and probably adopted, really, probably just they probably were brought there, and then they probably had the folks that they brought there were probably had children, and then those children went back because if they would have had the ability to grow up in that culture from birth. So that's how I would imagine that would work. Is it wouldn't be just okay. We're going to send people out like missionaries, like Christians do to these random countries in like Africa or dropping Bibles in China or whatever whatever the things that we try to build these nations and stuff. Like that's not the right way to reveal uh, higher, more advanced culture or spirituality. Like it's too much. They can't handle it. Is what I'm trying to say. It's just way too much at once. All right. You can't expect that. If I go with a smartphone, all the things I could do with a smartphone and go to some tribe in I don't know, Amazon or something or Africa or some place where those folks have had zero, absolutely zero like interaction with modern humanity, never mind technology. They're gonna think I'm a god, or they're gonna be scared and probably want to kill me, or otherwise just be so confused about what they're experiencing that it's just out of their perception, out of their they have no clue. So the whole point would be to slowly reveal things here and there, and you don't try to take away the things that they've evolved in their culture or their society, um, or even their nation. You pick the best of it, and then say, okay, here's the things that you're doing really well. Here's how we can do that even better. And then once they see how that goes, then they go, okay, that kind of supersedes all the other things that we're doing. And it's a slow process over probably hundreds of years or thousands of years before people will evolve. You can't just drop such major things on them at once. So that's the biggest thing, like is making sure that it's done in a methodical way that's not going to be like over revelation to these people. We have to understand that evolution is slow, human growth is slow. I mean, we came from primitive fear religion, and now we have this understanding of a God that's all loving, that's unconditionally loving, and everything that came in between there. We had like the sacrifices of animals and or even babies, and then it was like fruits and grains, and then it was okay. Jesus is the last sacrifice, and now we know if we look at the Old Testament even that God doesn't delight in sacrifice, but we had to get through that whole thing, and we have the whole slow rollout of the understanding of the universe. Where on normal worlds we first understand the probably just the Earth, the planetary prince, and then we have like um, the Most High's Medentia. We have Michael of Salvington, and it goes up the Ancients of Days of the Super Universe, and up to Supreme Being, and all the way up to Universal Father. Just different levels of the universe and just different levels that we're able to understand. I mean, if we were on a normal planet, if you will, we might not know about anything besides maybe Christ Michael. We might not even know about Havona or Paradise. I think because of the fact that Christ Michael was here on Earth as Jesus of Nazareth, that's why we know about it. And then we have even societal things, and this is these are going to be probably more on the tough side, but we have to contend with it, right? Nobody in their right mind today would ever say that slavery is acceptable in any form, unless you're a slave wage, and maybe you can justify that. But human slavery, that's it's not even a question, all right? Not even a question, but it sadly was not that far in the distant past. And the Urantia book even says that that was a step above what we had even before slavery, which was just, complete wholesale killing of entire nations of men, women, and children. Whereas this, because it was a step up for society, because okay, now they at least take them as slaves, and they spared their lives. Sometimes if it was women, they took them as wives. If it was men, they worked the fields or whatever, and they had a chance to potentially in later days, get out of that. And now, of course, we've evolved much past that as a human race, where most of us consider, slavery, just a crime against humanity, and then we have, like the profit motive, like, yeah, in the future, if you ever watch Star Trek, you know that we're going to probably approach a society that's cashless, where the motive is at best, your pride in what you do, or your currency is how you can help social service, and how you can, maybe your what like scientifically or philosophically. But back in the past, it was just a lot of stealing and theft, and then it came to the place where you have the marketplace, and it ended up being a safe place. And then they come up with the idea of bartering, and then trading, and then you have like currency. All right. And currency was kind of like a placeholder that you could trade, use as like, okay, I want this, you have that, let's trade this currency. And then, a way to get ahead was, making profit. You have the capitalistic society that we have, which is far better than anything we had in the past. The Richard book likes to use the word the scaffolding. So as you can see, the scaffolding that leads us from more primitive things to more advanced things. And we have so far we have to go as a human race. But the whole point of all this is, even with the revelation of God, God the sevenfold. Everything is done in stages. It's a rollout. It's not all dropped on us at once. All right. So what is the whole point of all this long spiel I've been going on for about 20 minutes or so? And that's going to come down to the fact that we're all looking for disclosure. We're all sitting here waiting for the hat to drop, or waiting for President Trump or whoever gets the honors of going before the stage and saying, "Hey, major breaking news: there's aliens." But I kind of, I was kind of thinking about this the other day, and I was actually at the gym today, and this is when I decided, all right, I think I'm going to make a statement on this myself. I'm going to preempt all of it, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who's had this thought. It's not original, and that's the whole point. I'm just one more voice that's laying down another stone in the foundation. It's another voice. Even the movie that's coming out from Steven Spielberg, Disclosure Day. I mean, if you watched it, it's not necessarily that these aliens are from out there, out in space, from another galaxy or from another solar system. They're right among us, folks. And the Urantia book talks about them. They call them Midway creatures, the United Midway creatures. They've been here for hundreds of thousands of years. And the Midway creatures are, if you have read the Urantia book, without getting too much into detail, were the offspring of, I believe, if I recall correctly, the corporeal staff, and then there was the human beings that came and lent their life plasm to these beings who did come from off planet, and when they consummated, their children were ended up being the primary midwayers, and then Adam and Eve, when their children mated with one of the last of the line from the prince's staff, the corporeal staff, they had the secondary midway creatures. They don't explain exactly how it happened. They say it was some kind of liaison, in the most unusual way. I don't know if it's because they're not allowed to tell us, or it's or if it's beyond our finite human brains to understand how it happened. But some liaison, and then the secondary midways was a sexual and non-sexual liaison, they call it, created these creatures. And there's like, I don't know, thousands of them, if I recall correctly. I know those 1,111 secondary midway creatures, that I do know. I just forget how many of the primary are. But there's a United Midway creatures, these beings that are the permanent inhabitants of Earth. And they're just outside of our mortal range of vision. And sometimes they have the ability to manipulate the environment what we call material things. And sometimes they've been able to reveal themselves to human beings. Sometimes they've been mistaken for celestial beings or angels, which I would distinguish as off-world beings, aliens, if you want to call them that. Celestial beings would just be would basically be synonymous with aliens, except for maybe if you want to quantify as aliens would be mortals from other realms, where celestial beings are beings who do not originate from an evolutionary world. So you got those, but I think what's going to happen is actually if I was a betting man, which I am, and if there was a way to bet on this, I would, but it's spiritual, so there's no point. But I'm putting my money on, spiritually speaking, the Midway creatures revealing themselves first. That's what you've been waiting 20 something minutes to hear. Midway creatures are revealing themselves first. Not aliens, not celestial beings, not mortals from other planets, but the Midway creatures. Why do I say that? Slow rollout, folks. Why expose the whole universe when I mean, great that we have the Rancher book. We have people out there that believe in the aliens. That's fine. And maybe some of us will be ready for it. But I think it would be easier if they started slow. Why just jump right into saying, okay, yep, the Rancher book was right. Here's all these different thousands of different celestial beings and angels and uh, beings that far transcend your comprehension. Why not start with the inhabitants of the planet you live on? That's what I put my money on. I think that's what when disclosure comes, and I think that this is why Obama said they're real. I just haven't seen them. And this is why I think a lot of times, people are, like when you see the UFOs and the UAPs, people are like, oh, we don't really know what's going on, and that's why they haven't released it because the government doesn't have enough information to or have a comprehension of the matter to come out and say that, yeah, we know exactly what this is. They don't know. Nobody knows what it is. You know, they can't prove whether these beings came from off the planet or not, or whatever spacecraft. It could have been something that the Midway creatures built. Who knows? We don't even know what they're doing. It doesn't say. Besides the fact that they're here to help us, and they're here to keep a memory of what's happened on Earth and help us spiritually or socially. It doesn't say what they actually do. We don't really know what they do. We can't see them, and we don't know how they communicate with us or how they reveal themselves to us. But I think if it was going to come to the point, which I know it has to. I mean, think about it. If you're a believer of the Urantia book, if you believe that when you die, your soul lives on, and you go somewhere or you exist somewhere, there must be life beyond Earth. How best to slowly roll that out? How would you do that? You would start with the least common denominator. Well, planet Earth. There are beings who live here, and they're going to be here for a long time. And I think that makes the most sense. I think humanity would be more ready to handle that than, everything at once. We have the Rancher book. We have science fiction. We have people that supposedly channel. We have, people that have visions and near death experience. It's part of our culture now. Everybody at least hopes that aliens are real or believes that aliens are real. Very, very few people really are staunchly like, nah, it can't be any, there just can't be any. We're alone in the universe. I think we're quite ready for the idea that humans aren't alone. But to jump straight into it, 0 to 60, probably not smart. Probably would cause pandemonium. I think someone like myself could handle it, but I would say at least half the people of this planet would probably lose their faith or go crazy or worship them or something, cross between those three things. But if we learn that there's other beings here, still might see that, but not as much. you know, not quite understand. I mean, this is such a relatively new concept, not new concept, but just a new determination that I made. And I don't know if I can fully justify it, but it feels like it makes sense. Kind of like the Richard book just made sense, even though I couldn't quite fully explain why. But it just makes sense, just like that movie that's coming out by Steven Spielberg. They live among us. What better way to start with our own planet? and then go from there, because everything else has been a slow rollout as far as what's been revealed to us over the centuries, over the decades, and millennia, whatever. I had that order mixed up, but so here, there you have it, folks. My stream of consciousness is done. I'm tired. That's what I think is going to happen. That's what I predict is going to happen. That's what I all but prophesy will happen. The Midway creatures are going to be the first non-human entities revealed to the human race. Thanks and God bless.